A quiet subway ride takes a dark turn when danger steps aboard. Tension rises, fear spreads, and no one dares to intervene until one person decides enough is enough. What happened next shocked everyone. Stay until the end to witness a moment of bravery that will leave you speechless. What would you do in their shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments. The city was in chaos. Massive protests had paralyzed traffic, and cars were stuck in endless jams. John Cena, the world-famous wrestler and actor, sat in his car, frustrated by the standstill. After checking the time on his watch, he sighed and decided to leave the vehicle behind. He grabbed a baseball cap and a pair of dark sunglasses, hoping to remain unnoticed in the crowd. Taking the stairs down to the subway station, John purchased a ticket and boarded the train, blending in with the passengers. He chose a seat at the far end of the last car and unfolded a newspaper to occupy himself during the ride. The train rattled to life, its wheels clanging against the rails. John glanced around briefly. The car was moderately full, with a mix of students, workers, and a few older passengers. Most people stared blankly at their phones or out the windows. It was an ordinary subway ride, or so it seemed. At the next station, the train screeched to a halt, and a group of 4 men barged in. They were loud, dressed in leather jackets with the words "Hell Wolves" emblazoned on the back. Their rough, unkempt appearances and cocky attitudes immediately caught everyone's attention. Passengers averted their eyes, sensing trouble. The men exchanged smirks, their laughter echoing through the car as they scanned the crowd for entertainment. One of them, a tall, bearded man with a scar running down his cheek, locked his gaze on a young black girl sitting near the center of the car. She wore a school uniform and had a backpack resting on her lap. She seemed intent on minding her own business, staring at her phone. However, her attempt to remain invisible only made her a target. "Hey, look at this one," the scar-faced man sneered, nudging his companion. "What's she doing here? This isn't your kind of place, sweetheart." The girl didn't respond. She kept her head down, her fingers tightening around the straps of her backpack. "Don't ignore me," he barked, stepping closer. "I'm talking to you." The girl flinched but didn't say a word. The other men chuckled, encouraging their leader's behavior. "Bet she thinks she's too good to talk to us," another man said, his voice dripping with mockery. "What's wrong, princess? Don't like making friends." John Cena lowered his newspaper slightly, his eyes narrowing behind his sunglasses. He stayed silent for now, observing the scene. His muscular frame remained relaxed, but his grip on the paper tightened. The girl glanced around the car, looking for help, but no one made eye contact. The tension in the air was palpable. Most passengers chose to remain silent, sinking deeper into their seats, unwilling to intervene. "Hey, maybe she doesn't speak English," one of the bikers joked, eliciting more laughter. "Or maybe she's too busy thinking about how to steal someone's wallet." Still, the girl didn't respond. Her silence only seemed to infuriate them further. The leader leaned in closer, towering over her. "You think you're better than us," he spat, "sitting there like you're too good for anyone. Let me tell you something, you're nothing. Got it?" The girl finally looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and defiance. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say anything, a firm voice cut through the tension. "Why don't you tough guys explain why you're in the subway instead of riding your fancy bikes?" All heads turned toward the source of the voice. It was a black woman, well into her 60s, sitting a few seats away. Her hair was pulled back into a neat bun, and she held a shopping bag on her lap. Despite her age, her eyes burned with sharp intelligence and unyielding courage. "What did you say, old lady?" the leader growled, turning toward her. "You heard me," the woman replied calmly. "If you're such big, bad bikers, why are you slumming it here with the rest of us? Couldn't afford gas for your toys?" A few passengers stifled nervous chuckles, but the bikers didn't find it funny. The leader's face darkened with rage, and he marched toward the elderly woman, leaving the girl momentarily alone. "You've got a big mouth for someone who should be home knitting," he hissed. "And you've got a big ego for someone hiding behind his friends," she shot back without missing a beat. "Picking on kids makes you feel like a man?" The leader clenched his fists, his knuckles whitening. His companions moved to stand behind him, creating an intimidating wall of leather and steel chains. "You've got a death wish, lady," one of them muttered. The woman remained unfazed, her posture straight and dignified. "I've lived through worse than you," she said evenly. "You don't scare me." The leader let out a derisive laugh, but his amusement was short-lived. He snatched the shopping bag from her lap and held it up mockingly. "Is this your dinner?" he sneered. "Hope you're not too attached to it." With that, he flung the bag to the floor, scattering its contents, bread, milk, and a few vegetables, across the dirty subway car. Gasps rippled through the passengers, but no one moved to help. The woman didn't flinch, her gaze steady as she stared him down. The leader's smile faded. Her refusal to show fear enraged him further. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a metal baton, flicking it open with a sharp click. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," he said, stepping closer. "But keep pushing, and we'll see how far that luck goes." John Cena folded his newspaper neatly and set it aside. Slowly, he stood up, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the car. He adjusted his cap and took a step forward. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice calm but firm. The leader turned, startled by the interruption. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" John removed his sunglasses, revealing his face. His piercing eyes locked onto the leader's, unyielding and resolute. "Just someone who doesn't like bullies." The air in the subway car was thick with tension as all eyes turned toward the elderly woman and the gang of bikers encircling her. The leader of the group, his knuckles tight around the metal baton, stared at her with a mixture of anger and disbelief. She didn't flinch under his glare. Her steady gaze, a silent challenge, seemed to pierce through his bravado. The younger girl, still seated nearby, clutched her backpack tighter, her wide eyes darting between the gang and the elderly woman who had fearlessly confronted them. The rest of the passengers remained frozen, too afraid to act, but unable to look away. The leader took a step closer to the woman, his baton glinting under the dim subway lights. "You really don't know when to shut up, do you?" he snarled. "You think you can just run your mouth and nothing's gonna happen?" The woman leaned forward slightly, her tone calm but cutting. "What I think," she said, her voice carrying through the car, "is that it's pathetic for a grown man to pick on a child. And now you're trying to intimidate me? That baton doesn't make you a man. It makes you a coward." The passengers exchanged nervous glances. A few whispered among themselves, but no one dared to intervene. One man adjusted his tie and turned his head toward the window, pretending not to notice. Another clutched his briefcase, his knuckles white. The bikers, emboldened by the inaction of the crowd, erupted in mocking laughter. "You've got a big mouth, Granny," one of the men said, shaking his head. "Maybe we should teach you some respect." The leader sneered, his fingers tightening around the baton. Yeah, let's see how tough you are when you're not hiding behind your words. He raised the baton slightly, a cruel smile spreading across his face. The tension in the car was palpable, each moment stretching out longer than the last. Still, the woman didn't back down. Her voice was firm, unwavering. "Go ahead," she said. "Show everyone here what kind of man you are. Let them see you for what you really are, a scared little boy throwing a tantrum." Her defiance sent a ripple through the bikers. One of them hesitated, glancing around the car as if noticing the staring passengers for the first time. But their leader remained undeterred. He took another step forward, towering over her now. "You think you're brave, huh? Let's see how brave you are when—" Before he could finish, a sharp voice cut through the air. "That's enough." It was John Cena. He had been watching silently, his expression unreadable, but now he rose to his full height, his figure commanding the attention of everyone in the car. He stepped forward deliberately, placing himself between the gang and the elderly woman. His cap shadowed his face, but his voice carried an authority that was impossible to ignore. "Leave her alone," he said firmly. The leader turned to face him, his sneer faltering for a split second before returning. "And who the hell are you supposed to be?" he spat. His tone was dismissive, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes as he took in John's broad shoulders and calm demeanor. John removed his cap and sunglasses, revealing his unmistakable face. Gasps rippled through the car as recognition dawned on the passengers. "I'm someone who doesn't like bullies," he said evenly. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. One of them whispered something to the leader, who shot him a glare before turning back to John. "You think you're some kind of hero?" he said, trying to mask his nervousness with bravado. "You're just an actor. This isn't the movies, pal." John took another step forward, his eyes locked onto the leader's. His voice remained calm but carried a weight that silenced the rest of the car. "Put the baton down," he said. "Walk away." The leader hesitated, his grip on the baton loosening slightly. For a moment, it seemed like he might back down. But then he glanced at his companions and straightened his shoulders, forcing a laugh. "You think I'm scared of you?" he said loudly, more for the benefit of his gang than anything else. "It's 4 against 1. You don't stand a chance." The bikers rallied at his words, their confidence returning. One of them stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Another pulled a chain from his pocket, twirling it menacingly. The leader smirked, lifting the baton again. "Let's see how tough you really are." John didn't move. He stood his ground, his gaze steady as the bikers began to surround him. The elderly woman and the girl watched in silence, their breaths held. The rest of the passengers seemed frozen, their fear keeping them rooted to their seats. The leader lunged first, swinging the baton toward John's head, but John ducked effortlessly, stepping to the side and grabbing the man's wrist. With a swift motion, he twisted it, forcing the baton from his hand and sending it clattering to the floor. The leader let out a grunt of pain as John pushed him back, causing him to stumble into one of his companions. The second biker rushed forward, swinging the chain, but John sidestepped the attack and delivered a quick, precise punch to the man's gut, doubling him over. The third biker tried to grab John from behind, but John spun around, using the man's momentum to throw him against the wall of the car. Passengers gasped as the biker crumpled to the ground. The leader recovered and charged again, his fists swinging wildly. John blocked the punches with ease, delivering a powerful uppercut that sent the man sprawling. The last biker hesitated, looking at his fallen companions before deciding to rush in. John grabbed him by the arm, twisting it behind his back and pinning him against the pole. The fight was over in seconds. The bikers lay on the floor of the subway car, groaning in pain, while John stood over them, his breathing steady. The passengers erupted into applause, their fear replaced by awe and relief. The elderly woman smiled, nodding her approval. "Thank you," she said simply. John turned to her and tipped his cap. "Just doing what's right," he replied. As the train slowed to a stop at the next station, the bikers began to scramble to their feet. But before they could make a move, the sound of police sirens echoed down the platform. 2 officers entered the car, their expressions hardening as they took in the scene. Passengers quickly explained what had happened, and the officers moved to apprehend the bikers. The young girl, still clutching her phone, hesitated for a moment before stepping forward. "I recorded everything," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You can use it as evidence." One of the officers nodded, taking her phone to review the footage. Meanwhile, John helped the elderly woman gather her spilled groceries, handing her the bag with a small smile. "Are you sure you're not a hero?" she asked, her tone teasing. John chuckled, putting his sunglasses back on. "Not a hero," he said, "just someone who doesn't like seeing good people get hurt." With that, he stepped off the train and disappeared into the crowd on the platform, leaving behind a car full of passengers who would never forget what they had witnessed. The subway car was still buzzing with the aftermath of the intense encounter. Passengers whispered among themselves, their voices a mix of disbelief and admiration. The bikers, groaning in pain, were being restrained by the police officers who had just arrived. One officer pressed a knee against the leader's back as he snapped handcuffs onto his wrists, while another began questioning the passengers. The elderly woman sat back in her seat, her composure as steady as ever. She watched the scene with a quiet sense of satisfaction, her groceries now neatly packed back into her bag. The young schoolgirl, who had been the initial target of the bikers, stood off to the side with her phone in hand. She had shown the officers the video of the fight, and they were reviewing it, nodding in agreement as they saw the clear evidence of the assault. "Looks like we've got enough here to put these guys away for a while," one officer muttered to his partner. The leader of the bikers, his face twisted with a mixture of pain and rage, growled under his breath. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You don't know who you're messing with. We'll be out before you know it." The officer didn't even look at him, calmly tightening the cuffs. "Save it for the judge," he replied flatly. The bikers were let off the train one by one, their threats and grumbles drowned out by the noise of the busy station. John Cena, still standing by the doorway, watched the entire scene unfold. His presence commanded respect even from the officers who nodded at him in acknowledgement. One of them approached, extending a hand. "Thanks for stepping in," the officer said. "Not many people would have had the guts to do what you did." John shook his hand, his grip firm but unassuming. "Just doing what anyone should," he replied. "Glad you were here to finish it." As the officers escorted the bikers away, the mood in the car began to shift. The tension that had gripped the passengers moments ago started to dissipate, replaced by murmurs of relief and gratitude. A middle-aged man in a suit stood up and offered his hand to John. "That was incredible," he said. "You really saved the day." John gave a small smile but waved off the praise. "I just did what needed to be done," he said simply. He turned to the elderly woman. "You okay?" he asked gently. She looked up at him, her sharp eyes softening with gratitude. "I'm fine, thanks to you," she said. "Not many would have had the courage to stand up to those bullies." "It wasn't just me," John said, nodding toward her. You stood your ground first. That takes real bravery." The woman chuckled, shaking her head. Bravery or stubbornness. Either way, I wasn't going to let them think they could intimidate everyone. The young girl approached cautiously, clutching her phone. "Excuse me," she said quietly, looking up at John. I wanted to thank you for everything." John crouched slightly to meet her eye level, his expression warm and reassuring. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "You were brave too, just staying strong through all that." The girl hesitated before holding out her phone. "I recorded what happened," she said. "I thought maybe people should see it." John paused, glancing at the phone before looking back at her. "That's up to you," he said. "If you think it'll help people, then share it. Just remember, what you did today was just as important as what I did." Her cheeks flushed slightly, and she nodded. "Thank you," she said again, her voice firmer this time. As the train prepared to leave the station, John picked up his cap and sunglasses, sliding them back into place. The elderly woman called after him as he made his way to the door. "You've got a good heart, son," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." John turned back briefly, offering her a small smile. "Take care of yourself," he said before stepping off the train. The passengers watched as he disappeared into the crowd on the platform. The young girl stood by the door, her phone still clutched tightly in her hands. She opened her social media app and began typing, her fingers flying across the screen. Moments later, the video of the encounter was uploaded along with a simple caption, "A real hero." Within minutes, the video started gaining traction. Comments and likes poured in as people shared their reactions. "Who is this guy?" One comment read, "We need more people like him in the world." Another said, "John Cena proves once again he's the real deal, on and off the screen." Back in the subway car, the mood was lighter now. Passengers smiled at one another, exchanging quiet words of appreciation for what they had just witnessed. The elderly woman leaned back in her seat, a satisfied smile on her face. She glanced at the young girl, who was still glued to her phone, and gave her an approving nod. "Looks like the world's about to hear a good story," the woman said softly. The train doors closed, and the subway rumbled back to life, leaving behind the station and the memories of a confrontation that would soon inspire countless people. John Cena had come and gone, but the impact of his actions would linger far longer than the few minutes he had spent on that train. The subway car continued its journey, leaving behind the chaos of the previous station. The elderly woman adjusted her bag of groceries on her lap, a quiet satisfaction etched on her face. Around her, the atmosphere was palpably lighter. Passengers, who only moments ago had been frozen with fear, now exchanged whispers of awe and relief. A sense of shared camaraderie lingered in the air, sparked by the actions of a man who had stood up when no one else dared. The young girl, her hands still trembling slightly, stared down at her phone. The video she had uploaded was already gaining traction with notifications pouring in. Likes, comments, and shares flooded her screen, each one a testament to the impact of what had just transpired. She glanced up at the elderly woman, who gave her a reassuring smile. "You did good, dear," the woman said softly. "Sometimes, showing the world what really happens is the bravest thing you can do." The girl nodded, her confidence bolstered by the words. She looked around the car, noticing for the first time how many people were smiling. Some passengers quietly thanked the elderly woman for standing her ground, while others discussed the hero who had stepped in to protect her. "That man," one passenger said to another, "he was incredible. You don't see courage like that every day." At the next station, a small group of people boarded the train. Among them was a man in a business suit, holding a tablet. As he glanced around the car, his eyes caught sight of the video playing on someone's phone. His eyebrows shot up in recognition. "Wait," he muttered to himself, moving closer to the screen. "Is that John Cena?" The murmurs in the car grew louder as more passengers began to realize who had just been among them. Conversations broke out, each recounting the same story, how a group of bikers had terrorized the train only to be stopped by a man who refused to tolerate injustice. "He didn't even hesitate," one man said. "He just stood up and took charge like it was the most natural thing in the world." Meanwhile, outside the subway, the video continued to spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up within hours, running headlines like "John Cena takes down subway bullies" and "Wrestling star becomes real-life hero." Social media exploded with praise and admiration. Fans and strangers alike commented on the footage, lauding his bravery and condemning the actions of the bikers. The phrase, "not on my watch," which John had uttered during the altercation, quickly became a trending hashtag. Back in the car, the elderly woman leaned back in her seat, her expression thoughtful. "It's funny," she said aloud, drawing the attention of those nearby. "I've lived through a lot, seen things that would make most people lose hope. But today reminded me that there's still good out there." A young man sitting across from her nodded. "He didn't just stand up for you," he said. "He reminded all of us that we can do the same. Maybe next time we won't just sit here." The woman smiled warmly. "Let's hope so," she replied. "It only takes one person to inspire change." As the train approached its final destination, the passengers began to gather their belongings, their conversations still buzzing with the events of the day. The young girl hesitated before stepping off, glancing back at the elderly woman one last time. "Thank you," she said softly, "for standing up for me and for showing me how to be brave." The woman reached out and patted her hand gently. "You've got more courage than you realize, dear. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." The girl smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. She walked out onto the platform, her phone buzzing with notifications as messages of support continued to flood in. In the days that followed, the story of John Cena's heroics became a global sensation. News anchors replayed the video on television, highlighting his calm demeanor and quick reflexes. Interviews with the passengers painted a vivid picture of a man who had risked his safety to protect others. The young girl's video, now viewed millions of times, became a rallying cry for standing against bullying and injustice. John himself remained quiet about the incident. When reporters tried to reach him for a comment, his response was simple. "I just did what anyone should do. The real heroes are the people who choose to do the right thing every day." The elderly woman, too, found herself in the spotlight. She received letters and messages from strangers, thanking her for her courage and resilience. In an interview, she reflected on the experience. "People like those bikers thrive on fear," she said. "But fear only has power if we let it. That day, on that train, we chose something stronger than fear. And look what happened." The video's impact extended far beyond the subway car. Donations poured in for anti-bullying campaigns, and social media was flooded with stories of everyday people standing up for what was right. John Cena's actions became a symbol of hope and courage, reminding the world that even the smallest acts of bravery could create ripples of change. As for the young girl, she found herself inspired to do more. She started volunteering at a local community center, helping others find their voice and their strength. Whenever she doubted herself, she would replay the moment when John Cena looked her in the eyes and told her she was brave. Those words stayed with her, shaping her actions and her future. And so, what began as an ordinary subway ride became an extraordinary reminder of the power of standing up for what is right. Though John Cena may have left the train that day, his impact lingered in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed his bravery. The world was a little brighter, a little kinder, because one man had refused to look the other way. Sometimes it only takes one person to make a difference and stand up for what's right. This story reminds us that courage and kindness can change everything. What do you think about what happened? Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us, what would you have done in this situation? Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more powerful stories like this one.